Oops, I said record to this computer. Should it record to the cloud?
Uh, Brandy, which option should we select?
Go ahead and just do to your computer and then you can send it to me and I can distribute it to the field.
Perfect. I feel like a Zoom newbie. All right. So today with the data, we're going to start at the national level. I'm going to look at data from everywhere around America except Iowa and Maine because they don't have GED programs. And then we're going to dig into Minnesota specifically. When we're looking at data, it's really important for us to recognize who's included in this data set and who is not included in the data set. So specifically included here, these test takers who took their first GED Ready and their first GED test from January 1st of last year to November 11th of last year. We excluded those test takers who spent less than 5 minutes on the GED Ready and less than 10 minutes on the GED test. Those less than 5 minutes on the GED Ready, you can imagine they're just shopping around, trying to see what is actually on the GED test and get a sense of it. Whereas the less than 10 minutes in the GED test, I'm sure you all have those students who have test anxiety and they go into a testing center and they just can't finish. So we excluded these outliers within this data set today. We also excluded test takers who took their first GED Ready test after they took their first GED test. These kinds of students, as you can imagine, probably were very close to graduating and they just think they're going to bang all four subject areas out at once. And so they take the GED test and then they fail, and then they go back and they study, and then maybe they'll take a GED Ready test after that. So those also are outliers that are not included in this data, as well as those test takers who take the GED test repeatedly prior to their first GED test. So we know that practice does make perfect sometimes, and these students are taking the GED Ready test more often than just taking it for the first time. And then importantly, the data set only consists of English language tests, not Spanish tests. So now that we know who is included in this data set, we're going to look at a national level. Here I'm displaying RLA and math. The next slide is science and social studies. So we'll look at all four content areas, but let's start with the RLA and let me explain what we're looking at here to you. So on the left-hand side, you can see the GED Ready zones. So we're all familiar with red, yellow, and green. And then the next couple of columns are about passing the GED test after those zones. So did they pass it or did they not? And what is the total number of tests taken? So let's start with the red. So a student scores a red on the GED Ready, and they decide to go and take the GED test anyways. So around 453 people decided to do that. And 272 of those 453 did not pass the GED test. But 181 did. And I know that's not what we're here to talk about today, but isn't that interesting that there's still some who did pass the GED test? And that could be for a number of reasons due to how the person took the GED Ready. You know, we always talk about take it in a real steady environment, true to the nature of what the test is going to be like. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they just skipped through it. So it is an interesting number there that we're not investigating today. The next part I want to talk about is the yellow. A student scores yellow on the GED Ready. 1,966 go on to take the test. 917 don't pass the test. But the curious number is that 1,049 do pass the test. And this is why we call it too close to call. You can see that, you know, if a student, we try to motivate students if they get a yellow to still go on to take and try the GED test. And this is repeated in this data set as we go through that this too close to call really does become apparent. And finally, those students who score green on the GED Ready, 31,492 test takers went on to take the test. And I'm only going to look at the yes who passed, the 27,720 went on and passed the test. You'll see below now that I've highlighted some numbers, and these numbers are of interest to us here today. So that number, 93%, 92.87, I'm rounding up, 93% of students, this is representative of the students who scored green on their first GED Ready. The next couple of numbers there that I've highlighted, the 88%, that's 88% of those who go on to pass the GED test on their first attempt. This is on RLA, this is nationwide. 12% don't pass on their first attempt. So this 88% represents the percentage of students who passed both the GED Ready test, GED Ready test and the GED test on their first attempts. Moving down to the blue part that I've marked out there, this is the passing rate, which means that 85% of students who score a green will go on to pass the GED test. In math, that passing rate is 73%. And 78% represents the number of students who pass both the GED Ready test and the GED test on their first attempts. I'm going to go down to the next one, which is science, and it's the same. I just want to point out that 89% of students who passed, this is a representative who passed both the GED Ready test and the GED test on their first attempt, and the passing rate is 88%. Social studies is also, I would say, high, with the passing rate of 83%. Keep those numbers in mind as we now go into Minnesota. Here we have RLA and math, science, and social studies. Let's take a look. So RLA, those students who scored red on the GED Ready, 12 went on during that time frame, remember, 12 went on to take the GED test and 9 didn't pass. Looking at that yellow again and that too close to call, 27 went on and didn't pass the test and 24 did pass the test. Looking at the green, student who scored green on the GED RLA, 894 went on to take the test and 785 passed the test. This 93% that I've highlighted there is the number of students scored green on their first GED Ready. And the 88% there, as I'm rounding up again, are those who go on to pass the GED test on their first attempt, and 12% don't pass on their first attempt. And the passing rate is 85%. This is basically identical to the national data that I just shared with you. In fact, if you look at the math on the right-hand side here, that 76% passing rate is higher than the nation data that we looked at. Science also is 2 percentages higher with an 89% passing rate. And social studies is at a 88. And looking at that 90% there, that 90% is of those who have passed the GED test on their first attempt and the GED test on their first attempt. So this is the data. I can't see you all. I can see you down here. But what I don't want to just stop here, but I do want to answer any questions if you have any questions, because what I really want to do is show you a new tool to put in your tool belt. If you want to come off mute or there's chat.
Yeah, if anyone wants to ask their question directly, or if you want to put it into the chat and I can read it out, your choice, if we have any current questions.
I would say Minnesota is doing better than the national. Okay. That's all good and well. This kind of data search makes us feel really good that the tool is still working, that the predictability is still there, feeling good. But this doesn't really leave you with much. And I feel like when I come to these chats, I want to leave you with something for yourself. And I wanted to have a look here. Why I took a screenshot of our website. I'm going to go live onto our website and show you where to find all of this and what are you looking at exactly. Um, have a look here. Do you have a student like this? Do you gets a green on a GED Ready, but doesn't pass the test? This is why we're here today. That's you. Or who repeatedly scores between 140 and a 144 on the GED test. And then the worst of all, who won't schedule the test, but they do, and then they don't show up. So what I want to share with you today is a program that that really tries to get at what I like to call non-academic skills. So like motivation, responsibility, confidence, and resiliency. You all have those students who they come to their science class. Science is one I always pick on. They come to the science class, they take their GED ready, they get a green, and they're like high flyers, and you're like, way to go, Anne, you've got this in the bag. And you send them off to a test center to go and test, and they come back and they failed. And you kind of have a feeling about Anne's not doing well, but I'm not quite too sure. She knows all those science skills. Why is she repeatedly not passing the test? I'm just not sure. And whether it's to do with you have so much as a teacher on your plate that you have to teach again, or Anne runs away at the end of class all the time, and you don't really get a chance to really get to know Anne because she's just trying to bang these out. I want to share with you a tool. Let me see here. That wasn't how it was supposed to go. Okay, can you see GE.com? I'm looking at the chat here.
No, Ann, we can't. We can still see the slide, the GED Test Prep Coaching Program slide.
Okay,
And then now we
great.
just see you.
Yes, I'm trying to navigate Zoom here. I'm sorry. I'm going to put it down here and let me try and share again.
While you're
Share.
looking for that, we have a question in the chat. It says a teacher asked about the status of the 2014 series and when it possibly will end. If we haven't.
There are no plans right now to have it end. Can you see G.com now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
There are no plans as of right now to have it end. The standards in high school are still the same. We are always constantly looking for what we might end up doing, but no plans right now. Rest assured, GED, as we know it right now, is staying here for the time being. So that's why it's important to know GED. So let me show you. I hope that you're all familiar with the educators and admin site here. And we've changed the navigation up here to be more specific to who the user is. So educators or administrators, educators, we have teaching the test. That's where you find the AGE, the assessment guide for educators, and the high impact indicators, how to really help your students with those skills. And then the free classroom materials, all the tutorials, all of the other materials that we've created that you can help with your students. And then down here is what I want to draw your attention to, the GED Test Prep Coaching Program. So it is free to you. It is free for your students. What is it? There are 6 modules here that are timed in little increments. The total number of these modules is 45 minutes out of your day. The purpose of the coaching program is so that you will be able to give your student a test, and the test will be 10 minutes long, 52 questions. It can go on their phone, and they will be able to dig a little deeper into some of those other concerns that you may think something's going on with Anne. She's got all those science skills. She really can ramble off everything, but she's still failing the test. What else can I do to figure out how to help Anne? And so this course is aimed at teaching you about 16 different dimensions. So here, let me open this up. This is the 14-page sample report, or the report that you would get on your student. Test mastery. Is this student ready? Are they prepared? Are they ready? What is their test mastery? If they're low in test preparation, this report is going to show you where they're low. It goes down. It tells you if this person is average. So it gives you a descriptor for what does that mean. And then you go out further down and it tells you kind of what does that person look like in terms of their style. And then it breaks it down into 4 dimensions: motivation, responsibility, confidence, resiliency, things that we don't test. We test academic skills. These are all these non-academic skills that lead to test mastery. I have to stress that because this is not about getting a job or SEL or anything like that. So here you get this overall radar chart that really shows motivation is pretty low here. And you keep scrolling down. These 4 dimensions turn into 16 different competencies. And through this test, it will show you where your student is really lacking. So what does your score mean? A low productive competency. You scroll down. Needs to become more productive and avoid getting behind schedule when studying for a high-stakes exam. Must overcome tendencies to delay and even skip test preparation activities. When you know your students and you can kind of see that this is what they're doing, okay, great, you've identified it. What I like about this actual report, and being an ex-teacher, what I really like is, okay, so what? It gives actions so that you can work with your student into their study plan, things that they could actually work on. When I was doing research on this product, we actually had a teacher who had a student who continued to get a GED green and then fail the test. And this student, it showed up that they were really worried and not resilient at all. And the actions came out to be like breathing exercises and things like that. And the student sat there and goes, yep, you don't see me when I go to the test center, how I can't breathe, I can't walk over that threshold. And I just kind of want to get out of that room as fast as possible. So I just kind of breeze through the test really fast. And the teacher is like, well, I didn't know that. I don't go to the test center with you. So, okay, the actions that were included in this outcome was doing breathing exercises. And the student was so happy that her issue that she could not address or talk to the teacher about it came out naturally from this report. And so they were just going to add that into their study plans. So that's an example, but there's case studies here where you can look at, is one of my students this kind of student or that kind of student? And it gives you actionable things that you can do with your student, the same as these reference guides. So you would take 45 minutes out of your day to go over these modules. And then right now that's broken. And then you would go and you would sign up for a free account. This account will give you the ability to give Anne's email address. I would get the test. I can do it on my phone. And then when I'm done, you'll be notified that the report is ready and you can sit down with your student and go through some of these things that I call non-academic skills that could be another part of why your student is not passing the GED test whilst getting a green on the GED Ready. That was the tidbit of information I wanted to leave you with today. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see the chat here. Thank you, Melissa.
Yep, no
Thank you,
problem.
Walt. Laura, puzzled why they aren't passing the GED ready, but they can do the work. Yeah, this is exactly with the teachers that I worked with to set this up. It was really illuminating and, it's not invasive. It's not, and you're not smart enough for those science skills. It's nothing to do with that. It's these other things that our students are going through that we really want to be able to speak to. But also the teachers that I worked on the research with said, I knew something was going on, but I didn't have the vocabulary and I didn't know how to do an action on that. So this gives you another tool in your tool belt to actually have those conversations and work with your students to hopefully help them overcome.
I also want to, this is Brandy, I also want to include, when we look at different pathways we talk about for our students, when we look at HSE options, secondary diploma options, if it's credit completion or if it's an HSE or even adult diploma here in the state of Minnesota, knowing their mental state and talking to them could be the next decision on do they take the test in person at a computer-based test? Or can they come to your program and take it online proctored within the classroom or the facility that they're used to? And that might kind of lower test anxiety because they're in a room alone. They're being watched through the computer screen versus through a window and feeling that eyes are peering on them. So it could just be changing a little part of their schedule or options for them. So we are always recognizing that students can take online proctored. You still get those test contact hours as if they were to walk into your test center for contact hours. And if it's their first time testing, it is paid for by the state of Minnesota with our one-time allotted funds that we were given. And so these are other options than just continuously sending them to the testing center. And there's more of a test anxiety because we know that's not an accommodation. That's not an allowable accommodation. And so what can we do to offset that need for students?
I'm not so familiar with Zoom, but I know that you could maybe raise your hand. If you want to just raise your hand for just to let me know, do you have students like this where this might really help to identify some other things that are going on with your students? Maybe there's not a hand raise in here. Oh, okay. We got a thumbs up. Okay. Well, I hope that that will help you to kind of identify your students. Rachel, I don't know if your hand is up or a thumbs up or you have a question.
Just a thumbs up kind of thing. Saying I have those students. So yeah.
I think so. I know it's very, very common.
I have to say, I was really surprised by the data because what we were seeing in the field and what you guys were bringing to the conversations. And I guess in the broad spectrum, it is such a small number, but when it's at our singular programs, it looks like a vast issue going on. We talked about how students are taking those practice exams. So, in terms of like 17 and 18-year-olds with that age waiver, they have to take a proctored practice GED Ready. And so, are we making sure that the students are taking their GED Ready in the same type of environment to expect when they take the actual GED? And so kind of mimicking those processes will be beneficial to see if they're not using their phones or if they're not at home and they might have a spouse or a family member helping them. Or if they're just in the classroom and they're not being proctored and maybe another student assists them. So these are always additional steps that we can do to see if the student truly is getting that. And of course, it's just a smaller version and it's less time constraint. And as we've seen, test fatigue can sit in. So there's just a lot of different factors to kind of trial and error with a student that might fall into this category where their practice GEDs are shooting through the roof, but then they're not passing when it comes to the actual test.
Also want to add that through research, I just developed some new school report videos, and by doing so, interviewing students, realizing really how low their confidence is, but also adding a new bit of information that we've shared with our field since we launched in 2014, which is, and it's not on our website, so good for you having a coffee chat today with us. We can say with 80% that if you go and take the GED Ready and then you go and take the GED test within 2 weeks, not around 2 weeks, within 2 weeks, the sooner you take the GED test, or not you, but your students, the more likelihood they're maximizing their chances of passing the test. And through my research, some students were saying, well, I took the GED Ready and I got a green, but I don't get paid for another month, or I don't get paid for another 3 weeks or something. And I'm like, eesh, that's just too bad. You should be planning out when you can afford to take the GED test and schedule appropriately, because that maximizes your chances as well. So that's another tidbit of information that you might want to put in your pocket as you go forward. Are there any statistics on people passing the RLA and what are they scoring? No, we don't have any statistics going over like that. But what I will say about the extended response, and I want you all to continue teaching the extended response, is because it's 20%, it's weighted 20% of the test. And what I like to say is, why would you walk away from 20%? At least trying to have at least trait 3, where it's English language conventions, to get some kind of a score. I've worked hard on the scoring tool that's out there. So you get the GED Ready, you score their GED Ready extended response. We're not talking about the extended response today, but I'm very passionate about it.
Melissa, I know that you responded that there is an offline version. Is there any information that you could post in the chat for individuals for that GED Ready?
Yeah, actually, I'll post the link here. But like at a very high level, as long as you have at least, one computer that is not connected to the internet, you could purchase GED Ready offline. And there are 2 forms for each subject in each language, so available in English and Spanish. And then as soon as the tester is done, they do get a printed score report. Unfortunately, though, because it's offline, the scores for these GED Ready tests do not show in GED Manager. So somebody at your organization would have to keep track of the scores. But let me find that link and I'll post it here right now.
So I have a question to add on to that is, if they're getting the score report printed, can the program leadership go into their account and add that score in either notes or somewhere else to where it can follow the individual and we see it ourselves?
There isn't a way for them to do it in GED Manager.
There is.
There is not. There is not a way
There's not.
for
Okay.
even me to go in and add it into GED
So,
Manager.
because we can add it to our state system in SID, we have a
Right,
notes
we could.
area, but
Yeah.
for like purposes of MDE, where sometimes where we have to see passing scores or we have to see attempts, it would be more beneficial if it was in the manager, because then we're able to, because we as a state team cannot go into our state program, our system, and see individual students. We purposely keep that kind of distinction away from students. So GED Manager is our way of seeing scores like this and weighing of interpreting what the students' next steps are.
Okay. Yeah, let me just grab the link and put it in here.
I added that there's also those free practice tests and tutorials that you can download them so you can use them in corrections.
Perfect. Is there any other questions that you may have from the field that you're wanting to address, if it's specifically on the data or if there's any other GED related questions? We have until 2:30, which was our allotted time, but of course, if we always end early, no one's really upset about that.
Lee has a question about accommodated GED Ready test. So a screen reader test is what I'm presuming you mean, Lee. We are working on that right now. We do have the screen reader test available for the GED test, and the GED Ready test screen reader, we're working on that right now. I'm assuming that's what you mean by accommodated exam. Well, thanks for having us here today. If no one else has any other questions.
I don't see any in the chat. Oh, are there any plans for GED in French?
No, we discontinued the GED in Canada last May, and French Canadian was up there, but we're sticking to English and Spanish for now.
With us specifically, we have such a large refugee population. Like, I don't know if you know this, but we have the largest, I believe it's Lebanese population outside of Lebanon, if I'm stating that correctly. And then we also have a large Somalian population. So these are sometimes barriers that we have, specifically within our state, is that we are getting individuals by larger numbers than most states that are needing a different language, and we don't have access to that for them. And that is a very big barrier for them moving forward. Even if they had some type of high school diploma from their other state, a lot of ESL students choose to continue on through an HSE instead because financially it's just a faster route for them versus paying hundreds of dollars and having their transcripts sent over and transcribed, and then they still lose credits. So as you start to think about different options, maybe looking at regional areas that have higher populations that would need different translations and options of the test, that's just something we always want to advocate for our people specifically here in Minnesota.
Yeah, so for us right now, we're developing our app, and we're also developing an AI tutor that will aim to be able to look at some of that academic English that learners need, not just conversational ESL, but looking at some of the terminology, which is oftentimes the problem with having students come over from overseas. They might be speaking conversationally at home, but they don't actually have the academic skills to perform on the test. So we're trying to prepare students with additional tools, such as an AI tutor that could potentially talk to them in their native language. But we don't have any plans to bring French from Canada down to America.
Yes,
Those are the old tests.
and this is great feedback, though. So thank you for that. One of the things that AI, which we are exploring actively, ways to kind of improve and enhance what we're able to do using these fast developing tools, is kind of the facility to create translated versions of content much more rapidly than traditionally. So this is great feedback for us that we can take back and think about, is there a way we can build into our roadmap, bringing back some of these additional languages?
Well, since I have you here on the meeting wall, one of my thoughts that we have had issues with is just the keyboard alone. Students have English or language barriers based off of the keyboard.
Right.
So if we're thinking of AI having a virtual keyboard that could be assessed in their language, or even a translating, so they're able to take the English word and translate it for themselves. So it's not asking specifically for any type of additional assistance where it wouldn't be eligible for the test, but just being able to put the word and having AI translate it in French or translate it in Lebanese or whatever language that they are. We have Afghanistan, we have a large population. That would be a huge next jump, because I've had Spanish speaking students that can't pass based off of the keyboard because they don't have a Spanish keyboard.
Interesting.
So
Yeah.
these are the things that we face on a day-to-day.
Thank you for that, Brandy. It's really great feedback.
That's the view testing sites that we don't have the Spanish keyboard. So I will make sure that I leave you with the knowledge that please go to the educator button as I showed you and go into the free resources, because in there's a specific AE symbolo for the Spanish, so that on the Spanish test, when you get into the extended response, the symbolo opens up on the top left-hand corner so that you can do all your diacritics. But if you have Spanish speaking students, they need to know that that's what's there. So that's part of the test prep, because we don't have Spanish keyboards in the test centers. I'd like to point that out. The test is aligned with college and career readiness standards, Bonita. The grade level is appropriate. It's usually grade 9 level for reading, for math, and RLA. They're all leveled appropriately through 3 different Lexile readabilities.
Thank you for your answer.
No problem. I was reading it. I was just waiting for my turn to talk.
Okay.
And Anne, I know Lori put a question here. I think she accidentally sent it just to me, but was meant to be shown to you and Walt. I have quite a few students stuck in that 140 to 144 GED math test score.
Yeah. I recommend that you go to our high impact indicators under those teaching resources. If you're familiar with them, I call them the biggest bang for your buck. The way that we determine them are those students who are scoring 165 and higher versus those who are 140 to 145, and try to see what kind of different skills they were doing and performing better at a higher level. And so go there and have a look at the cross-content comparison chart, because oftentimes I know you're teaching RLA and social studies, perhaps to the same students, and you see that Anne is doing really well with inferring from a passage in RLA, but Walt, he's not really doing well in his social studies with inferring. It's the same skill. It's just different content that it's being taught in. So pair those up together and then give them the high impact indicator. Thank you, Melissa, to see across all 4 content areas where a student who's doing well in one content area of that skill, it's the same skill in another content area, and see how you can better, this can identify it, and then you can improve upon it that way. Data literacy is one of the biggest sticking points for students. So using that score report, making matrices so you can see how students are doing across the content areas, and the high impact indicators are aimed at helping you get that student just over that 145 threshold. That helps.
And I'm going to be downloading the chat with all these links that have been shared, as well as the slides once I get them from the team, and I'll be emailing them out to everyone registered, so you'll have access to this as well, and the recording.
Great. Well, glad it was helpful, Rachel.
Are there any other questions from the field? Well, I just want to say thank you so much for coming and speaking directly to the individuals in this coffee chat, answering our questions, as well as giving us some information from behind the scenes versus just us wondering what's happening. So it's nice to know that we have that collaboration with you, and we can always come to you with concerns that we're seeing. And I just want to say thank you from Minnesota, and hope you have a wonderful day. And welcome to GED, Walt. Buckle up. It's a
Thank
fun
you,
ride.
Brandy. I'm ready. Thank you so much. Really nice to meet you. Appreciate the opportunity to talk with everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a wonderful
Thank you.
day, everyone.
Bye, everyone.